Chris. The first question is describe your philosophy on business.
I think always be truthful and trustworthy, first and foremost. Make sure that folks can trust you. And I think after that, think of others first. You know, I see so many times when interactions with whether it's employees or employers or just individuals in the community, folks have conflicts when they're not thinking of others first. They're putting themselves first.
Mm-hmm, sure. And I know we just talked about your career a little bit, but describe your career, if you would.
We have a contracting business that provides erosion control and grassing services, mostly for contractors and developers, but we do some drainage issues and things like that for homeowners as well.
So describe the changes that you've seen in your company or the business as a whole, and even the industry, if you wanted to. Describe some of the changes you've seen.
I think probably the biggest change that I can put my hands around is the fact that it's harder and harder to find people that want to work, want to have a career, and be successful at something.
Man, I completely agree with that. I can't tell you, people still think I'm in the staffing business, and I did that for quite a while, and I still get calls,
Yeah.
about trying to find help. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. Everybody's looking.
Yeah.
What have you seen or experienced in your professional life that's had an impact on your business?
I think noticing how we've gotten called a number of times over the years to come in and fix something that somebody else did because they either didn't know what they were doing or they didn't perform it properly, and then folks end up having to spend twice or three times sometimes to get something done properly versus just doing it right the first time.
Yeah. Any funny stories at all over your career with the business?
There's one that comes to mind that it may be hard for people to get their hands around, but in a professional organization that I'm a member of, the International Erosion Control Association, for years we've had an annual conference, and it varies in locations, but one year in particular it was in Las Vegas, and they had a little contest for folks that are in the hydroseeding business, which we do. That's one of the methods of sowing grass that we have is through a hydroseeder. It's a big water tank with a big powerful pump on it and a nozzle that you can spray seed and fertilize and stuff out with. And it also comes with a hose that has a nozzle on it. And so there's one contest we had in particular that ended up being pretty funny, but we dress up in rain suits. You got two teams of two. Each one has their own hydroseeder filled with water. And there was this exercise ball in the middle of a parking lot. And behind each set of people were two cones. And so your goal was to spray the ball and push it to the other person through the other person's cones. And so they matched us up with a pretty darn good team. And I was shooting, I had a guy behind me handling the hose. And we started shooting this exercise ball, and it started rising, and it rose and rose, and it probably got 40 feet in the air, and it wouldn't move. We were hitting it so perfectly together in the equal spots on the opposite sides that it didn't come down. So finally it was like, okay, we got to break this. So I just moved it real quick so it fell, and then I worked it around it. But that was pretty funny. And we had a dinner crowd there, and everyone really enjoyed that.
Yeah, good. What would you say has influenced your success as a business leader, as a community leader, somebody that's very involved, obviously, with your role, not just from a business standpoint, but also as a servant of the community? What would you say has influenced your success?
I think over the years, seeing a number of individuals and quite a number of individuals that have dedicated their lives, have sacrificed to build this community up to what it is today, very selflessly. It's one of the most generous communities I've ever known of. I mean, if you have a fundraiser for any kind of a charity, it's going to be successful and very successful usually. But that comes from so many individuals being dedicated to put themselves forward and spend the time and effort to make those things successful.
Yeah, right. I completely agree. It's amazing how giving our community is.
Yeah.
It really, really is. All right, we'll talk community next. Describe the changes that you've experienced in our community here in Jackson, Madison County.
One of the first things that came to mind was how big business, how I've seen big business like big box stores push out little businesses and squeeze them out of business. And now it's interesting to see how the public is demanding that those small businesses return to some degree. I'll never forget coming to Jackson for the first time when I went to Union University as a student and becoming familiar with Duffy's Home Center. And it was like, for guys, it was like a toy store. And they had everything you wanted, everything you needed. But eventually, the big box stores pushed them out of business. Well, now we have companies like Ace Hardware that's opened up an individual store because people can go in and get individual help. They don't have to just do everything themselves. You've got Northside Lumber, you've got Jenkins Lumber, you've got so many other places that have kind of taken the place of those because of the demand. Folks want that personal service and the personal attention they give.
Yeah, right. What's one event that's happened in the past that caused our community to be as successful as it's has been?
One thing that sticks out in my mind is the tornado that hit Union University, and how I saw the community immediately that same night come together.
Mm-hmm.
I was on site. I had equipment on standby to come and help. But there wasn't an immediate need. There was already equipment on site that started working, and then watching how people just interacted with each other and made sure that the safety of those students was first and foremost. And then outside of Union, obviously there was a lot of damage around the community, and so many others were out directing traffic or doing anything they could to assist those people. And just knowing what that did for the community, and you know, it's unfortunate it takes a negative event maybe to bring people together. I'm not saying we were apart, but it was very noticeable around that time frame and after, how the community seemed to just bond together better.
Yeah. And it's amazing, you know, with that event, there was not one single loss of life.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, that was, and there were kids in those dorms.
Oh,
that were
absolutely.
stuck.
I was watching as Randy Campbell was on top of a pile where those students were underneath it somewhere. He had sitting on it with a tri-coat, and there's people all the way around, and I'm watching this, and finally he just stopped the machine. Said, "Hold up. I want everybody to stop looking at me, stop talking to me, except that guy right there. If you want me to know something, you tell him. I'm only watching him. I can't watch everybody. I'm watching him."
Yeah.
And so the directions went through him, and he was literally picking piece by piece to get those folks out. And as a side note, at that time, he was an alcoholic. And after that, well, I think he was going through treatment at that time. And I thought, man, this is going to be tough for him. But
Yeah.
he stayed strong through that and maintained that.
Wow.
And I think has stayed sober ever since. You
Good,
know,
good for
it
him.
was just a really amazing thing to see, because I've known
It was.
Randy a long time, done a lot of
Yeah.
work for him.
Yeah, I lived in a neighborhood across the street, kind of back off to the left from where the dealership was, and I was
Mhm.
watching
Yeah.
when it hit the bank and all that. And the sky was a weird, funky purple. Yeah.
Wow.
What have you experienced or seen over your professional life that's had an impact on our community?
I think one of the things that I've drawn from those experiences has been how important it is for us to value the more aged, more experienced in our community. Sometimes they get overlooked, and there's just such a tremendous value there in experience and knowledge and wisdom and advice, and then just in assistance. They're almost always willing to help, and so just remembering to draw from that, and never to discount those in our community that are elderly.
Mm-hmm. Right. Any funny stories about the community you can remember or recall?
It was either 3 or 4 years ago. I was asked by a local church to attend a special worship service that was honoring, I think, first responders. Well, Saturday night at 9 o'clock, prior to this Sunday morning, I was sent a text that was the program of that service. And up at the very top was my name as the speaker. I had no idea I was speaking at this, much less leading a sermon. And so I'm scrambling. I'm like, oh, okay, let me see what I can put together. So I'm starting to think about where the community was and different things. And I had a topic that came to mind, and then the Lord laid some scripture on my heart. And I just got started good on it. And then my wife comes in, very upset. There's a snake on our doorstep. and porch lights, bugs, frogs, snakes. And so I've got to go deal with a snake at 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night, and still prepare for the sermon. And I was able to do it, and the Lord blessed me in that, and it came off without a hitch. But it was a rush job for sure, and I had to have His guidance on that one.
You gotta love those late night. Oh, by the way, what do you want to accomplish with the rest of your life for our community?
I think one of the things I would love to see, and I think a lot in our community would love to see this, is bringing back kind of the interaction and way of life that I grew up with, my parents grew up with especially, where neighbors know each other, they care about each other, they're involved in each other's lives to some degree, they're willing to help out, they're always looking out for their neighbors. And I'm in a neighborhood right now where that takes place for the most part. We look out for each other, we're watching each other's properties, we drive by, and we're calling, checking on each other. And if anybody needs anything, you can have 5 or 6 folks at your doorstep in literally a couple of minutes, if there's any need whatsoever. And so that's what I would love to see our community. I think that solves so many problems when we get back to that way of life. And unfortunately, I think our society as a whole pushes away from that, unfortunately. But we can be purposeful and try to bring that back.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now we'll hit the personal section. Do you remember an event that happened in your youth that had a major impact on your life?
One of the first things that came to mind as I thought about this was an event when I was probably 10 years old, I guess, and I was helping my grandfather and my dad on a soybean crop. We were harvesting, so it would have been in the fall, and I didn't really have a specific task at 10 years old. I was just kind of out there. But my granddaddy was driving down, operating the combine, going down one direction in the field, and I'm sitting at the end of the field, and there's a tractor there, his big tractor hooked to a grain wagon. And I'd seen him start it, put it in gear. I knew how to do everything, I thought. So I thought, while he's not looking, I may just, crank it up and move it a few feet and just kind of see how that feels. Well, I did that. Everything went fine until I thought, well, wait a minute, he's going to know where this was setting. I probably ought to back it up. Well, it's a 4-wheel trailer, and they don't back the same as a 2-wheel. And so I just put it in reverse and backed up a few feet. Well, little did I realize until it was too late that I had jackknifed the tongue of that trailer into the wheel and bent it. And so it was not usable for quite a while. And so I was sent home walking, which was a pretty good distance, and then had to watch my granddaddy and my dad late at night out there cutting and welding on that thing to get it ready to be able to use the next day. And so I learned a very valuable lesson there about, stay in your lane, do what you know you're supposed to do, and don't go out on a limb with something you don't know how to do when others can suffer for it.
Right. If you could leave one message to the future generations to come, what would that be?
There's a lot of them, but I really think of others first. The golden rule, do unto others, but certainly think of others first. Put others before yourself in your decisions you make, the things you say, the things you do.
Okay. As you look back, what would you wish you had accomplished that you haven't?
I've thought about that a few times. I've never really had any regrets of the way, of the path that my life has taken. But the one thing that I have thought of occasionally is military service. I think if there had been a way to weave that in for at least 4 years, I would have been better for it. And hopefully the country would have still survived. But that's one thing that I've always admired. I grew up under a World War II veteran that was just a close family friend, almost like a grandparent to me, and taught me such a deep respect for this country, for our founders and what we stand for worldwide, and certainly for our military.
Yeah. Describe your philosophy on life.
I would say that would be to set a Christian example as you serve others.
Okay. Any funny stories in your life? I know you mentioned working in the field and all that, but any other personal funny items you want to share?
I had a friend, and I don't know why this came to mind, but I had a local friend here in Jackson that asked me to go and visit a cabin he had. I believe it was on Open Lake in Lauderdale County. They had a lot of Asian carp problems, and he wanted to kind of show me that and see if we could actually shoot those, because I use bow and arrow to shoot fish with quite a bit. And so we went up on one weekend, and late one afternoon. We were going to do this in the evening, but we got out there early enough to where we could just motor around the lake, and he was going to show me a couple of his duck blinds and kind of get ready for the night. And as we were motoring around, just very like a fast idle. We weren't planed off or anything, just a fast idle. We got into a school of these fish, and they started jumping, and immediately one jumped in front of me, came out of the water and landed. Now his son was with us. He was probably 10 or 12 years old. Literally hit him on the top of the head and bounced off in the boat. And he had the slime in his hair, and it was nasty. And then about the same time, one comes from the left side and hits my friend right in the face, right around his eye, gave him a black eye. He had a black eye for 2 weeks. And so both of those fish went in the cooler immediately. And because I've got a friend that will take all of those. They're really good to eat. That's the only good thing about them. And so it was an adventure that started from there, and then it ended with a bunch of fish in the boat, but only one had a hole in it. I only hit one fish that night. Any of us, every couple of us shooting, and you can't hit fish when they're flying that well. But you can catch them in the boat.